Welcome back to the Crypto Strategist, the place where we slow down the noise, cut through the hype, and give you the real picture of what is actually happening in the crypto world. I am glad you are here today, because what we are talking about is something that has been circling the XRP community for months now, and honestly it deserves a serious, honest conversation. Not a panic, not a pump, just the truth, laid out clearly, so you can make sense of it all. Because here is the thing. There is a story spreading across YouTube, across Twitter, across every XRP group you can find, and it sounds incredible. It sounds almost too good to be true. And when something sounds that good, that is usually the moment you need to slow down, take a breath, and actually think. So that is exactly what we are going to do today, together, right here on the Crypto Strategist. Now, before we go any further, I want to be completely upfront with you, the way I always am on this channel. I am not a financial advisor. Nothing I say today is financial advice. What I am is someone who takes this space seriously, who reads everything, watches everything, and tries to make honest sense of it for you. You work hard for your money. You deserve honesty, not entertainment dressed up as analysis. So please, always think for yourself, always do your own research, and never put in more than you can afford to lose. That is not just a disclaimer, that is genuine advice from someone who respects what you are trying to build. All right, with that said, let us get into it, because today's story has some real layers to it, and each one is more important than the last. Let us start with something that caught a lot of people off guard this week. David Schwartz, one of the original architects of the XRP ledger, one of the people who literally helped build this technology from the ground up, sat down for a conversation and said something that almost no founder ever says publicly. He admitted that he does not fully understand why XRP's price moves the way it does. Think about that for a moment. The man who helped engineer the rails, who watches every partnership announcement, every regulatory update, every technical development, he threw his hands up and said the price is not making complete sense to him either. Now, for some people that sounds terrifying, but I want you to hear it differently because there is something quietly important buried inside that honesty. What David Schwartz specifically pointed out is that over the last year or so, the price of almost every major cryptocurrency has stopped responding to real-world news the way you would logically expect. Partnerships announced, price barely moves. New payment corridors go live, nothing. Regulatory clarity improves, still flat. The one thing he noticed that has consistently moved prices? Exchange listings, not adoption, not technology, not partnerships, just getting listed on a new exchange. Now sit with how strange that is. The technology is advancing, the use cases are growing, the infrastructure is being built, and the market is basically ignoring all of it. That gap between what is being built and what the price is doing, that is not a reason to panic. That is actually one of the most important signals in this entire story, and I will come back to why in just a moment. But here is where things get interesting and honestly, a little frustrating. When a founder openly admits he cannot explain the price, that silence does not stay empty for long. Something always rushes in to fill it. And what has rushed in, loudly and confidently across every XRP corner of the internet, is the buyback story. You have almost certainly heard it by now. The claim goes like this. The United States government, or maybe the Federal Reserve, is secretly preparing to buy back XRP from everyday holders at some extraordinary price. Numbers being thrown around include $10,000 per coin, some versions even say $50,000, and the message is always the same. Just hold on, stay patient, the government is coming to make you rich. I understand why that story feels good, I really do. When the price is flat and you have been waiting a long time, a rescue fantasy is genuinely comforting. But comfort is not the same as truth. Let me walk you through why this buyback story simply does not hold up, because once you look at it directly, it falls apart almost immediately. Think about it from a basic logic standpoint. If the United States government or any large institution genuinely wanted to acquire a massive position in XRP, why on earth would they agree to pay you $10,000 for something currently trading at $1 or $2? Governments do not operate as charities for token holders. That is not how institutions work, and it is not how finance works at any level. If anything, a large institution wanting XRP in significant size would not go to the open market at all. They would go directly to Ripple, the source, and negotiate a private deal. The retail buyback was never a real strategy. It was a comforting story wrapped in the language of financial prediction, and those two things are not the same thing. Here is what replaces that fantasy. And honestly, it is more interesting than the fantasy ever was. The real institutional interest in XRP is not coming from a government rescue plan. It is coming from something far more calculated and far more quietly powerful, smart money accumulation. Institutions do not buy the way retail investors do. They do not tweet about it. They do not make YouTube videos promising you a price target. They accumulate slowly, strategically, in large size, while the rest of the market is distracted or selling. The big buyers are coming. That part might actually be true, but they are not arriving with a press release promising you $50,000. They are arriving in silence, in size, through mechanisms most retail investors never even see. That is how real money has always moved, and this cycle is no different. Now let us talk about the second layer of this story, because this is where things get genuinely exciting. While that buyback fantasy was taking up all the oxygen in the room, something real has been quietly taking shape behind the scenes. And it connects two names that, when you put them side by side, tell a very specific story about where global finance is heading. Those names are Ripple and BlackRock. Now let me be careful here, because being careful is the whole point of this channel. There is no confirmed, publicly announced grand partnership between Ripple and BlackRock. What there is a pattern. And in finance, patterns matter more than press releases sometimes, because the press release is always the last thing to arrive. BlackRock is the largest asset manager on the planet, full stop. And over the last 2 years, BlackRock has gone all in on one specific idea above almost everything else: tokenization. The process of taking real-world assets like bonds, treasury bills, money market funds, and putting them directly on blockchain rails so they can move faster, settle instantly, and carry richer data with them. That is the bet BlackRock is making with enormous conviction. Now look at what Ripple has spent years building: regulated enterprise-grade blockchain infrastructure designed specifically for the kind of institutional financial activity that tokenization requires. There have already been real-world tests of tokenized assets settling on the XRP ledger. So when you put those two facts next to each other, you do not need a leaked memo to understand why serious observers are paying attention. The construction is real, even when the official announcement has not arrived yet. And this brings us to the bigger picture, the one that makes everything else click into place. Because the Ripple and BlackRock angle only makes full sense when you zoom all the way out and look at what is happening to the global financial system right now. Quietly, beneath all the daily noise about prices and tweets and market moves, the actual plumbing of global money is being rebuilt. And the clearest fingerprint of that rebuild is something called ISO 20022. It sounds like a boring technical standard, and that is exactly why almost nobody talks about it on mainstream financial media. But it is the new global messaging framework that banks and payment networks around the world are adopting, so that money can move with richer, smarter, more structured data attached to every single transaction. In plain language, it is an upgrade to the language that money itself speaks. And the assets built to be compatible with this new language are the ones being designed for the world that is coming, not the world that already existed. At the same time, central banks all over the world are actively exploring digital versions of their national currencies. Now, a lot of people were told confidently that central bank digital currencies would never actually happen. But here is a detail worth sitting with. Look closely at a tightly regulated stablecoin, one that can be frozen by a court order, clawed back by its issuer, programmed to only work in specific contexts, and then look at a central bank digital currency. The functional difference between those two things is thinner than most people realize. They are essentially the same mechanism wearing different name tags. So the picture forming right now is this: for the first time in a generation, the actual rails of global finance are being torn up and rebuilt with new standards, new tokenized assets, and new programmable forms of money. And XRP was specifically designed to operate inside exactly this kind of world. Which leads us to the third layer, and this is the one that changes how you see everything else. Because in a world filling up with stablecoins, tokenized assets, and digital currencies, you might reasonably ask, is XRP just one more piece of this system, or is it something different? The answer is something different, and the reason comes down to one word: neutrality. XRP has no counterparty. It belongs to no single company, no single government, and it answers to no single jurisdiction anywhere in the world. And once you truly understand what that means in the context of a global financial system being stitched together from hundreds of different players who do not fully trust each other, you cannot unsee it. That neutrality is not a marketing point. It is the foundational engineering decision that makes XRP structurally different from everything else in this space. Compare it directly to a stablecoin, even a well-designed one like Ripple's own RLUSD. A stablecoin is, by design, a controlled instrument. It can be frozen. It can be clawed back. It can be programmed to behave differently in different circumstances, and the company that issues it could, in theory, face regulatory pressure, business failure, or policy changes that affect how that coin operates. A stablecoin is a genuinely useful tool, but it is a tool with an owner, and an owner always has the ability to say no. XRP does not have that switch. There is no company that can freeze your XRP on the ledger. There is no central authority that can reverse a settled transaction. There is no gatekeeper who can quietly exclude a participant from using the network. That is not a small difference. That is a structural difference that matters enormously at scale. Now think one step further, because this is where it gets really interesting. The world is moving toward increasingly automated financial systems. AI agents, smart contracts, machine-to-machine transactions happening at speeds and volumes that no human can oversee in real time. In that world, when two independent automated systems need to settle value between themselves, what asset do they reach for? Do they reach for something that one company can freeze, reprogram, or claw back at any moment? They would not. A rational automated system reaches for the neutral asset, the one that operates the same way for every participant under every jurisdiction, with no master and no off switch. That is the role a bridge asset is built to play, and it is the one role that a controlled stablecoin, by its very design, can never fill. So let us bring it all together, because when you lay these layers side by side, the picture is actually quite clear and quite compelling. You have one of XRP's own founders being honest enough to admit the price does not reflect the building happening underneath, which quietly tells you that price and value are not the same thing right now. You have a government buyback story that dissolves completely the moment you apply basic logic to it, replaced by something more realistic. Real institutional accumulation happening in silence, the way smart money always moves. You have a quiet but meaningful convergence forming around tokenization, with the biggest names in global finance circling the same infrastructure. You have a once-in-a-generation rewiring of global money through new standards and new digital currencies. And underneath all of it, you have an asset with one trait nothing else in this system can replicate. It answers to no one. None of that is a price prediction. None of that is a date or a guarantee. What it is clarity. And on the Crypto Strategist, clarity is always what we are here for. Stay calm, stay curious, keep thinking for yourself, and I will see you in the next one.